I don't want to set the world on fire.
Hi everyone, this is Violet Irwin. I hope you all are having a great day. Thank you so much for tuning back into my channel. I hope you have been well since the last time I saw you. But in any event, let's get to the video today. So today I want to talk a little bit about my background and a little bit about my ancestry, and also a little bit about what it's like to have been mixed living in the United States and also living abroad being mixed. I think that this area is something important for me to cover because I'm often accused of being just some white chick who thinks whatever. And the truth is, no one should be told that. Like, even if I were, quote unquote, just some white chick, that really isn't a good attack on my arguments, but I kind of just want to put this whole thing to bed about what ethnicity I am, what my ancestry is, and kind of give you guys a little bit of a background on some of the things that have happened in my life that have certainly defined my opinions on race and culture kind of together. So first, let me explain my background and my ancestry a little bit. So I am a decent amount European. I would say I'm probably like 40%, 50% just straight up European. You know, French, British, whatever. Now, in terms of that, I also have a decent portion of that that's Irish on my mother's side. I also have a decent part of my ancestry that's Italian. I would say around 12%. It's just straight up Italian, you know. Partially thanks to some knowledge that I just found out about my mother's ancestry. Now, I also have about 30% that is African. So that is Congo, Sierra Leone, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, all these countries I have ancestors from. The most predominant, like I said, in my European background is the French. Very, very French. So that's a little bit about my ancestry. I also have some Native American ancestry, specifically Choctaw, and it makes sense when you think about my lineage because the Choctaw tribe was in Louisiana, and that is also where a lot of my ancestors were. So the way that I like to phrase my ethnicity is French Creole, because I have a lot of French in there, but I really do have a significant portion of African, and my ancestors come from the parts of Louisiana, you know, kind of the Creole Cajun sort of area, which really means that they came from, or the French part of that came from Acadia in Canada, and that's where Cajun comes from. So my ancestors were in the part of Louisiana where the Cajuns and Creoles, you know, that's kind of where they were, coming down from French Canada. Also, especially on my dad's side, I have some Dutch ancestry that was involved in the founding of New York and other things like that. And if you go back far enough on my mother's side, you find relationships to Charlemagne, specifically to Charles Martel. If you guys know who Charles Martel is in relation to Charlemagne. Also, on my dad's side, if you go back far enough, Joan of Arc is actually related to me as an aunt, you know, a certain amount of generations removed. So that's a little bit about my genealogy, just so you guys all know. But with that, I did mention, you know, all these African countries, and you can imagine in Louisiana that there were certain tensions between, you know, the French, who had come from French Canada, and the Africans, who at the time were enslaved for the most part. Some interesting stuff about my ancestry. I mixed going back a long way, so it's not like I have one parent that's black and one parent that's white. Like, both of my parents are actually mixed, and that goes back a decent amount of time. So it's kind of like Creoles were marrying Creoles for a long time in my family. because we were a little bit lighter skinned, we often were in the house, so to speak, on the plantations, and this is something that has always bothered me in terms of the kind of narrative of the current social justice left, is that, you know, like they try to have different degrees of like slavery or different degrees of like oppression based on your skin. And to me it's like, listen, I'm sorry that my ancestors weren't the ones in the fields, but my ancestors were still enslaved inside the house. And with that, especially with the women, there were often instances where young women in my background were sexually taken advantage of by the slave owners. And it's pretty clear based on the census records and the age of some of the children that, you know, there was some kind of sexual foul play happening. And this happened in my family, it did. And I'm not ashamed to talk about that because it's part of my history. And the thing is, so many people would want to say, well, I'm just going to identify only with the person in my ancestry who was, you know, sexually taken advantage of and raped, right? Like, I'm just going to say, oh my gosh, what a victim I am, that I have ancestors that were, like, raped during slavery. But there's also the fact that, you know, that the Frenchman's blood runs through my veins too, you know? And it's not as if that act was that man's whole life, you know? And I think that it's important to, when we look through our ancestry, all of us, to acknowledge that the good and the bad are all still with us in our blood, you know? So I'm not ashamed to talk about that. It's something that happened in Louisiana back in the day, and you know, it's pretty crazy. So that's kind of the darker part of my most recent ancestry. Obviously, you know, with the Dutch being involved, there's a lot of Dutch slave trading as well, and so that's in part of my family ancestry. But I also have, you know, the slaves that were actually traded. They were part of my ancestry too, coming from all these countries in Western Africa. Now, a little bit about my more immediate family. My parents grew up in 3rd Ward, Houston. If you don't know where 3rd Ward is in Houston, just suffice to say that this is not a very affluent area of Houston. Houston, you know, has some really kind of intense ghettos, and I wouldn't say that 3rd Ward is a ghetto, but it certainly was a very poor neighborhood, especially when my parents lived there. It's getting a little bit more gentrified now, but both of my parents grew up in, you know, poor households, in black communities. And this is why, like, I get so frustrated when people try to tell me that I'm white or I'm not black or something, because my parents literally, you know, grew up during Jim Crow, where they had to drink out of different water fountains, go to different movie theaters, go to different swimming pools, just at the back of the bus. You know, my parents lived through all of that. It's that close in my family, in terms of dealing with real systematic racial prejudice, right? Because in that era, you know, separate but equal was the law of the land. Thank you, Supreme Court. Now, I want to tell you a few things about experiences I've had in my own life regarding race that really have kind of defined my opinion about it. Because the thing is, people don't really think about what it's like to be mixed. Everyone wants to just be like, oh, I'm black, I'm white, whatever. Or, you know, especially the extreme leftists like to label everyone in those terms and kind of just think that, you know, it's that black and white, you know, unintended, I guess. But I'm literally a blend, and so I'm going to tell you about these experiences, and I'm going to pose a question to the radical left and to the radical right. So, here's some experiences I've had. When I was, how old was I, like 10? I don't know, I was little. I was in elementary school, okay? And my dad and I were in Houston. We were visiting our grandparents. I grew up in Colorado. I never lived in Houston, just to be clear about that. I've always lived in Colorado, or on the East Coast, or in Europe. But in any event, so my dad, we were at a fried chicken place that's very popular in Houston, and there was a guy who was kind of, he was upset. He thought we were taking too long to order or something, but we were trying to decide what we wanted. But suffice to say, like, he and my dad kind of had a bit of an argument, and then he called us white niggers and told us, he's like, well, y'all are just a bunch of white niggers anyway. And that was very telling to me, because that is a whole different word, isn't it? Right? That's like a special term for someone who is like specific, like you're black, but you're like light-skinned black, and I'm gonna burn you specifically for that. And this was a black guy who said this. So that I was really little, that was a very telling example to me of how racism can go both ways. Now, when I was in high school, because I have kind of interesting hair, I've got a unique skin tone, so people do often ask me what my background is. But in high school, I had an English teacher who we were reading some books that were related to racism in America, and fair enough. There's some there, historically speaking and literature-wise, we should be exposed to that kind of literature. But he brought me in front of my class and asked me to explain what my ethnicity was. And then after doing that, he was like, how did that make you feel to have to talk about that? And then he was like, see, like, that's prejudice to like focus on this. And, weird way to illustrate that, right? It still makes me uncomfortable, like, thinking about, like, standing in front of my class and explaining that I was, like, mulatto. Mostly just because of how he did it, how he, like, singled me out and brought me up there. But granted, like, the percentage of non-white individuals at my high school, I think, was, like, 0.4%. Seriously, like, whiteys, right? Whitey city. But in any event, but I appreciate the point he was attempting to make, which is that, like, it was really inappropriate to, like, focus so much on that about me, because there's so much else about me. Like, why are you asking me questions about that? Like, that was kind of my English teacher's point. Then, I never was really that involved in, like, the black students associations or anything, mostly because I never wanted that to be something I focused on in my life. Like, I always cared much more about who I was as an individual. It was never natural to me to go into that world, and I think it's partially because of that experience that I had as a kid in Houston. Because the thing is, none of the other kids I interacted with here in Colorado ever made us think about my race at all. No one asked, like people want to make it seem like you're asked a lot of questions about your skin all the time. And that really only happened when I was older. It like, as a kid, it doesn't happen. My friends in elementary school and stuff, they could care less what color I was. That was totally irrelevant. And it was only when that guy said that in Houston to me that I even started to think about, like, whoa, like, does my skin even mean something? But yeah, through most of my life, I was not involved in any of these organizations. But then when I got to law school, I really was trying to be as involved as I could, because I know the value of networking, and frankly, I knew the value of being able to say that I was part of a black organization on my resume, because your job prospects in professional arenas when you're a minority are higher because of affirmative action. Like, I don't know how people can say that, like, blacks have it harder in that regard when we have affirmative action in place. Like, that's like literally false, So in any event, I decided, okay, this isn't usually my thing, but I'm going to join this organization. And I don't remember exactly how we got into this, but there was, I became treasurer of the Black Law Students Association. And I don't remember how we got into this, but there was one meeting we had where I was told that, because I had expressed some frustration with basically I had been told that because of where I grew up, I couldn't really say that I was black. And it's not that I couldn't say that I was black, but it was like, you haven't really been through it. You haven't been through the black, quote-unquote, experience. And I was like, well, I'm willing to admit that I haven't experienced that much prejudice in my life. And actually, to the extent I've experienced prejudice, like, it was actually from someone else who was black. Like, I really have not experienced like that much prejudice from white people. And frankly, like, even in that instance, like, that was kind of a rare thing that someone said something really racially motivated to me. And I think it was the president who told me that that the reason why black people do that to mixed people is because that we have to be reminded that we're still black and we're not any better than them, but we're also not really black because we haven't experienced the black experience. And so I bring this up because this is precisely the postmodernist nonsense pickle that is so prevalent in our society today, and something that has always bothered me and has really frustrated me about being someone who's mixed. Okay, like, am I oppressed or not? Right? Am I black or not? Like, if you have to remind me, why do you have to remind me that I'm black? Okay? If I'm too white to be black, why even remind me that I'm black at all? But if I'm too black to claim that I'm white, then, like, why are you even trying to what was that other part about, right? Or to put it more eloquently, if I can't rescind my black race card, but I also am not allowed to use it, then what is the point of it? And I would like to ask, okay, in light of my ancestry and a little bit that you know about my parents and all of that, this is my question to the left. To whom do I owe reparations, or am I owed reparations? Right? My parents lived through Jim Crow, okay? I have ancestors who were slaves, who were raped in slavery. I also have ancestors who raped slaves, right? I also have faced racism from black people, and my parents faced racism from white people. So my question to the radical left, to the postmodernist, feminist, gender theory, African American studies left, is to whom do I owe reparations, if any? Or, if I don't owe reparations, who owes me some? Or am I just neutral? This is a real question. I want to know. So that's real. Now, my question to the alt-right, or to these like ethno-state types who want to send people back to Africa or whatever, okay? I have ancestors that helped found New York, okay? I have ancestors that were hugely important in the history of Europe, right? I also have ancestors that were born in Africa and were brought to America on slave ships and then subsequently abused in the United States. To which of those ancestors am I loyal communally, race-wise, right? What of me? You know, you talk about like, oh, you relate so much more to somebody you look like. It's like, there's not that many people who actually look like me. And to the extent that there are people who look like me, the only place where they exist is in America. So my question to the alt-right is, where the fuck am I supposed to go? Or is this one of those things where I'm just supposed to be eliminated because I've like blended blood? Real question. I'm expecting this video to cause an uproar. Why wouldn't it? It's about race. But realistically speaking, these are things that press me and that piss me off about both of the sides of the coin. They want to play this racial politics game. And I am their Rubik's Cube, you know? Try to solve this fucking puzzle of race. Who's oppressed, who's not oppressed? Go through my life story and my ancestor story. And, you know, I didn't even get into all of the issues with the fact that I have Native American ancestry straight up. Okay? So you can sprinkle that in the mix, especially on the left. I'd like to see how you guys deal with that. I really hope that we can get to a place where a video like this, where I have to explain my background, would not be relevant at all to the conversation or to my ideas. But I really would like this just to be out there so that the question is put to bed for good. So thank you so much for tuning into this video today. I really appreciate your time. Please like and subscribe below if you liked this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
I just want to start a flame in your heart.